Most businesses don't actually have a branding problem. They have a perception gap. A gap between the brand they believe they're putting out into the world and the brand people actually experience when they interact with them. Hey, I'm Stephen, and I help simplify marketing so that you can grow without overcomplicating things. When people talk about branding, they usually talk about the visible parts. Think logos, colours, fonts, tone of voice. All of them important, none of them irrelevant, but customers don't experience a brand as a design system. They experience it as a series of moments. A series of moments. What happens when they first come across you? What happens when they click? What happens when they come back a second time? What happens when they're deciding whether they trust you enough to take the next step? Brand is built or broken in those moments. Not in isolation, but in sequence. You see this done really well by brands like Apple. And what's interesting is that it's not about how Apple looks, it's the fact that every interaction feels like it belongs to the same story. From the website, to the product pages, to the packaging, to the way the instructions are written. Nothing feels like a surprise. And that lack of surprise is exactly why people trust them. You always know what sort of experience you're stepping into, and that expectation is doing a huge amount of work in the background. This is why branding feels vague to so many businesses, because it's often treated as a project. You do branding. You refresh the look, you update the messaging, you launch the new site, and then you expect something to change. But nothing dramatic happens. It's confusing because on paper, everything looks better. The brand feels stronger internally, the assets are cleaner, the language is sharper, yet externally, customer behaviour stays the same. And that's because brand isn't something people see once. It's something they come to expect. Expectation is the key word here. A brand is not what you say you are. It's what people believe will happen when they interact with you. Before they click, before they inquire, before they buy, they're making quiet predictions. Is this going to be clear? Is this going to feel consistent? Is this going to be worth my time? And those predictions aren't shaped by one interaction. They're shaped by repetition. Imagine someone comes across your business for the first time. They see a post or a video or an ad. It's helpful. It resonates. It feels like it understands their problem. So they click, and now they're on your website. And they're not reading every word, they're scanning. They're looking for confirmation. They're asking themselves, often subconsciously, am I in the right place? They scroll, they glance at headings, they look for something familiar. And if that confirmation is there, confidence builds. But if it isn't, they hesitate. Not dramatically, not consciously, just enough to feel unsure. And uncertainty is where trust stalls. A really good example of this working well is Monzo. If you've ever used Monzo, what stands out isn't just the app design, it's how predictable the experience is. The language is consistent, the notifications make sense, the tone never suddenly shifts, and that predictability lowers anxiety. You don't have to think very hard when you're using it. And that's exactly why people feel comfortable trusting it with their money. Now extend this over time. A couple of days later, they see you again. Another piece of content. It sounds like you, but it doesn't feel quite the same. The emphasis is different. The tone has shifted slightly. The message feels adjacent, but not aligned. They don't think, this brand is inconsistent. What they feel is much more subtle. They feel less certain. So when they click this time, they behave differently. They skim instead of read. They hesitate sooner. They're quietly looking for reasons not to commit. And that's how brand perception actually erodes. Not through one bad moment, but through small mismatches over time. This is why consistency matters more than creativity. Creativity helps you get noticed. Consistency helps people relax. When people know what to expect from you, decisions feel safer. When they don't, friction creeps in, even if they can't explain why. Remember, consistency compounds. You can see this done really well by brands like Nike. Nike changes campaigns all the time, but the feeling doesn't change. The confidence is always there. The point of view stays consistent. So even when the creativity changes, the brand doesn't feel unstable. That's what consistency actually looks like in practice. And most of us have experienced the opposite too, where a brand looks confident on social, but the website feels dated. Or the messaging sounds premium, but the follow-up feels generic. Nothing is bad enough to complain about it, but something feels off. And that disconnect doesn't make people angry, it makes them hesitate. And hesitation is where momentum dies. Inside your business, the intention is usually solid. We're helpful, we're premium, we're customer focused. And that intention is real, but customers don't experience intention. They experience sequences. What happens first, then what happens next, and then what happens after that. Unless those sequences are deliberately aligned, perception drifts. To close the gap, you don't start with a rebrand. You start with the experience. You map what actually happens. What does someone see first? What do they encounter next? Where does confidence build and where does it drop? And then you remove contradictions, not by adding more messaging, but by simplifying the journey. The strongest brands I've worked with didn't obsess over how they looked, they obsessed over how it felt to engage with them. The second time, the third time, the fourth time. Customers pick up on that immediately. That's the difference between the brand you think you have and the brand customers actually experience. And it's why branding isn't the polish at the end. It's the thread running through the entire system. I've got one more video in this phase that brings everything together, looking at what to do when marketing isn't working. So make sure you're subscribed for new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I'll see you on the next one.